Hey folks, it's Rachel here with today's devotion. We're in the 8th chapter of Acts, which means we've now come to the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. If you need a quick refresher, here's how it goes. The Spirit tells Philip to go out to this road where he meets a eunuch from Ethiopia sitting in a chariot reading a text. Philip goes up to talk to the eunuch, discovers he's reading from Isaiah, and asks if he understands the passage. The eunuch invites Philip to share his understanding, and Philip does, and preaches the gospel. The eunuch responds by asking to be baptized, so Philip baptizes him, and then gets whisked off away to his next mission, while the eunuch remains to rejoice. Eunuchs held a really interesting position in the ancient world. They were castrated, or possibly sometimes intersex people, who were considered men, but not quite men, by most of the societies that they were in. Because of this strange sort of in-between position that they held, they had some really important functions in a lot of royal courts, for example. Oftentimes, eunuchs were servants who were appointed to guard the women's quarters in a palace, for instance. This is kind of problematic because the assumption is that since they're castrated, or since they're men but not really men, or something, that they won't be a danger to the women, and so they can be trusted. So they live in this strange sort of in-between place where the society reads them in this very problematic way, but because of that, they are put in a position that gives them access to people of power and potentially then access to influence. The other thing about eunuchs is that because most of them were castrated, they were considered incomplete physically, which means that like any other kind of blemish, whether you were missing a leg or blind or any kind of thing, you couldn't be a priest. In fact, eunuchs were barred from being in the temple altogether, even as congregants. They lived these in-between lives that were only used by the people in their society when they were useful to everyone else, and never really treated as full people. So now we reach this chapter of Acts, with all of that in mind. And we meet this eunuch who, like so many, is a servant of a royal court, a servant of a woman in a royal court. And he's coming to Jerusalem to worship. And he sees Philip. So many people refer to this story as the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch, but a lot of scholars and a lot of preachers have started referring to this more as the conversion of Philip. See, Philip grew up in this Jewish tradition where he would have expected eunuchs to be primarily only useful as servants of queens and not allowed into the temple. And yet, the eunuch asks him at the end, "Is there anything to prevent me from being baptized?" And there's just something about the way that he words that makes you wonder if he hadn't asked in another way, and Philip had been like, well, I don't know if we can include a eunuch. And his response was, well, is there any reason why not? It doesn't sound like Philip volunteered to baptize him. Philip preached to him, sure, but it doesn't sound like he volunteered to actually include this guy in the family of Christ. So he speaks up for himself, taking on a moment of courage and possibly danger to himself. This eunuch, who normally would have been barred from the temple, would have been seen as a sort of utilitarian person for a utilitarian function, now points out that he is also a child of God. A lot of queer theologians see in this a really powerful message of the incredible inclusive love of God and the radical overturning of power structures and expectations. It's a really beautiful message that no matter how long humans spend trying to exclude someone, God will always reach out, will always poke and prod at the people in the positions of power in the church until everyone is considered a full child of God, until everyone is respected for the gifts they bring and the people that they are. I hope you enjoy this story as you look through it this weekend, and I'll see you.